Hello everyone, welcome to Recursive Gaming and another video for Iron Saga. This video is a guide for the challenges, okay? Which challenges should you focus on as a new player? What's available to you? What choices you have available to make? Let's go ahead and take a look here in the challenges. The reason this is an important topic for new players is because it is the gateway to getting access to some of the better gear in the game, which can double or triple your damage dealing or your ability to tank hits. So, first most recommended part that I would consider getting first, okay, is going to be universally usable for many mechs. Okay, a lot of mechs have normal or explosive attack. Okay, a lot more have normal than explosive, but enough have normal and explosive attack that you can get use out of this on almost every mech. Okay, a lot of mechs have access to this, so it increases their attack by a decent amount. Okay, when you enhance this, it's going to be decent. It's not going to be the best, but it's also not going to be the worst by far. So it's going to enhance your attack. Also, the most important part is it absorbs 20% of the damage you deal and turns that into health. Okay, so it's basically life steal. This is one of the best forms of access for an early game player to lifesteal when they don't have a pilot that has it, or even if you do have a pilot that has lifesteal, if you get this, they'll have even more. So if you're playing as a mid-range, tanky, evasive damage dealer, and your Beckus is in, let's say, the Visago, you slap this on the Visago, and suddenly he's healing himself for a lot, not just from his abilities, but also from the damage that he deals. So this, for just the free mech that you get in the beginning of the game, the Visago, the base unit, which has a decent amount of normal attack built into it from the autocannon and the missiles, and so on and so forth. So long story short, this is going to be my top most recommended part to farm for. Number 17, okay? Chapter 17, the challenge. Second most recommended part is going to be number 11. Depending on the type of mech you're using, this is going to be more situational. Not all mechs have burst attack, okay? Burst attack, burst magazine is going to be really helpful. This item is going to double or triple the damage capabilities of certain mechs, okay? So don't go for this part if you don't use a burst attack mech. However, if you do have one, then I cannot recommend this part enough. It will, like I said, double or triple your damage. So let's go here to team. My top damage dealer is the Yaksha modified mech, okay? This is the best A rank ranged DPS mech available in the game, and it beats out many S rank mechs that a new player has access to. Okay, so this is going to be a phenomenal mech for starting players for DPS. And take a look at this, guys. Burst missiles and burst main armament. This burst main armament is also the high output shot. This high output shot is affected, the damage of that is affected by any increases that you didn't do to this. So if you increase the beam cannon's damage, you also increase the abilities damage, which is why the Visago is so good. Okay, so the shield flame shell are also burst missiles. We've already gone over another build that takes advantage of the burst missiles by giving them this item, the extended missile magazine, which gives them an additional missile with the burst missile weapons magazine. Okay, you combine that with the burst magazine from the burst core, and suddenly you're firing 8 missiles instead of 4. Okay, so the hardest hitting, or one of the hardest hitting abilities on this mech is the shield flame shells. Okay, so this build is green parts, and yet it does way more damage than you would expect from green parts. Okay, one of the only mechs that can boast this. So many mechs require purple parts or blue parts to shine and become really effective, but due to the very unique build for this mech, that's possible. So long story short, the first item I might consider getting as a new player, if I'm using the Visago, let's go ahead and take a look at the Visago. Let's go to the Pedia. This is the A rank only challenge account, so I'm not using the Visago, but here's the Visago. Look at all these forms of normal damage. Okay, so he's also got beam damage, he's also got fire damage. The disintegration ray and the heat gun does decent damage, all right, but believe it or not, most of his damage actually comes from the anti-aircraft missile. So the Visago's damage, at least half of the damage this thing deals, comes from the anti-aircraft missile. And I say that because of two things. Both of these skills reset the timing on the anti-aircraft missile and fire it again. So let's say he automatically fires the anti-aircraft missile. Okay, it's on a 12-second cooldown. You might be like, that's really low DPS. He can only fire this thing every 12 seconds. No. First of all, it's 8 missiles for 186 apiece. Now this is, boosted by items and pilots and whatnot. But let's say you've got Beckus and the Visago. Then the anti-aircraft missile fires. It does a lot of good normal damage. Then he comes here and does missile counterattack on a 16-second cooldown. Suddenly, he fires it again. Then he does assault on a 20-second cooldown. He fires it again. Now it's reloaded and it's available to fire again. That's 4 times. And then by that time, this cooldown has come back. So he's actually firing this thing like every 3 seconds. Right? So the anti-aircraft missiles, he's firing missiles constantly. Okay, so those missiles are doing lots of damage because of these two abilities right here. And then Beckus, what does he have? Beckus, the main pilot you start the game with, that they allow you, through all the gifts that they give you for him, to increase his rank as a pilot, making him one of your best early game pilots. You slap him in this thing, and then he's going to reset his cooldowns. Not only does he instantly reload all weapons and fire them all at once, meaning he gets another free use of the anti-aircraft missile off cooldown, he also lowers the cooldown on his abilities. He gets another missile counterattack. He gets another assault. So these missiles are, firing out constantly, not even including the anti-tank strike cannon. So he's doing a lot more normal damage than it appears based on this right here. He's actually firing these missiles a ton, okay? So if you slap that absorption shell on the Visago with Beckus, he's going to have insane survivability. I promise you. It's a really good tactic for early game players. So number 17 with the high energy absorption shell, number 1 recommended pick. Number 2 is the Chapter 11 burst amplifier for burst mechs, going to be huge. And then the next 2 choices are going to be situational, but they're going to be good for almost anybody, okay? Number 3, you have here, number 2. Yeah, very early on you get access to this, Chapter 2. The heavy armor. This thing is great because it boosts your HP by quite a bit, and it reduces knockup, knockback, and confusion duration. This is perfect as an armor choice for any melee mech that is trying to take the aggro for your team. On your team, if you've got a melee mech that's not meant for doing damage, but it's meant for tanking, then this is the perfect part. However, even if you have a melee mech that's trying to do damage, this is also a good armor part, because what's the main downside of a melee mech? If it doesn't have teleports, right? If it doesn't have the ability to move around the map quickly and lock onto targets and chase them down, it gets kited. Okay, so some very strong melee mechs in this game that you may have been lucky to pull and you might think are very strong can be kited and destroyed by a simple ranged A rank mech with lots of crowd control, because he won't be able to get to them. He'll be constantly getting knocked up, knocked back, or confused, or whatever. So against pilots that also have confusion and knock up and knock back, he would also suffer. So melee mechs can be kited around, and that's one of the main reasons you need an item that has this. This is not the only item that has this, but and you'll see this also in many pilots' skill kits. So if you have a pilot piloting a melee mech and they don't have this in their skill kit, you absolutely have to have this part. I recommend this for any melee pilot, so that way they can't get kited around and just destroyed without ever reaching the enemy. Okay, so this is third most recommended part. It's going to be great for any melee pilot. Then, for roughly the same reason, but for different situations, number 19. This is going to be one of your top most recommended parts for melee pilots. Okay, any melee mech you see, if you go down to the recommended parts button, then you'll see this in the recommended parts. This is one of the most recommended parts for melee mechs. It reduces chance to be knocked down and weapon recoil effect, which weapon recoil effect is not just when you fire a weapon, right? So it's not just when you fire a weapon and you get recoil from that. This also is weapon knockback effect. So knocked down and knocked back. If there's any weapons that knock you back because of heavy recoil, such as heavy autocannons, like for instance the Saga cannon version, when you fire those cannons, you notice how the enemy it gets knocked back. So that's great for kiting melee mechs. Same sort of thing. This will be able to ignore that. Now, this is only 20%, but it's at level 1. This increases. The 40% chance never changes, but the 20% goes up. It goes up close to 100% at max rank. So, this is one of the top most recommended parts for melee mechs. Also, this 40% chance to negate grab abilities is amazingly useful. One of the biggest counters to melee mechs in PvP and in certain story stages, and also bosses that you might fight in events and so forth, and side stories and stuff like that, is melee mechs with grabs. Okay, they can knock you down, take you out, and you never get a chance to fight back. Because, for instance, the Baihu, it's not a great mech, but if it gets a hold of you, you're not moving again. It's going to take you 100 to 0, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because a really well-built melee mech that's got a lot of grab abilities can do that. It's like trying to get in a wrestling match with a judo expert or a judo master. Like, you're just all twisted up. There's nothing you can do. So, long story short, this 40% chance to negate grab abilities is hugely useful for melee mechs because it prevents them from getting locked down by an enemy melee mech that has grab abilities. Also, if you're putting this on a mech with grab abilities, it means if you're going head to head and your mech with grabs is going against their mech with grabs, your mech is going to win because yours is going to negate the other one's grab abilities, which is most of where their damage comes from. Then suddenly you get the grab off, and it's like having a shield in a wrestling match, right? His hands just slide right off, and suddenly you've got the pin and you win instantly. Okay, so this is a really underestimated, underrated, misunderstood part by the new players in the community for Iron Saga. They don't understand just how good this is, and they might want to put pure HP, right? Or they might want to put block chance, or they might want to put something that sounds better. But do not underestimate this item. It is top recommended for melee mechs for a reason. That being said, I do recommend the heavy armor part in number 2 because I feel like it's more universally useful. You're less likely to go against grab mechs than you are to go against ranged mechs that have knock-up and knockback and confusion. So being immune to knock-up and knockback and confusion effects is going to be very helpful, in addition to the fact that this boosts HP. So for every time you go up against an enemy team where they don't have a grab mech, this is going to be a better part than the other one. But if you're going up against mechs that have grab abilities, you definitely need the part on number 19. Okay? And that's it for the 4 most recommended parts for early game players. I don't really need to recommend any more parts than that because by the time you farm the parts that you need out of those 4, you've been playing the game long enough to figure it out for yourself, and you've progressed probably way beyond Chapter 20. So you're going to have even better parts to look for past Chapter 20, and the parts get even better. When you start getting close to Chapter 30, the parts get really good. So for the early game player, that should do it, but for progressing past Chapter 20, you're going to have a lot better choices. And that's it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next one.